The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and His Wonderful Dog Bulger. Chapter 6, Part 2. Ere another moon had bent her crescent in the evening sky, we had reached the Cape and came to anchor with intent to overhaul our ship most thoroughly before going further southward. This occupied several days. I chafed under the delay. 10 times a day I summoned the ship's master to my cabin and urged him to make greater haste. He bore with me most patiently. My heart gave a leap when at last I heard the master order the crew to set the sails. The seamen were singing and tugging away at the mainsheets as I stepped upon the deck. "How shall I head her, little Baron?" asked the master, raising his hand to his cap. "Head to the south'ard," I replied. He stood transfixed. He had thought that we would round the Cape and follow the usual course to the Indies. His lips moved as if to protest. I cut him short, however, with an imperious wave of the hand. Several of the sailors, noticing the pallor which had overspread the captain's face, drew near and stood gazing upon us, half wonderingly, half inquiringly. "Captain," said I calmly, but quite loud enough to be overheard by the men standing in a group nearby, "my pistols were made by the Emperor's armorer. They never misfire. Let me find you changing the vessel's course a single point east or west of south, and I'll kill you in your tracks." Saying this, I walked away. From that moment, all went well. The ship's master saw that I was determined to have my way, even if I lost my life in consequence, and he yielded. Turning round to the group of sailors, I called out, "1,000 ducats to the man who first sights land." A hearty cheer rent the air, and calling to Bulger to follow me, I went below to think. That night I not only took the precaution to hang a lantern so that I could lie in my hammock and see a ship's compass at any time I might awake, but fearful lest some treachery might be attempted, I ordered my faithful Bulger to sleep with his back against the door, so that the least vibration would arouse him. Night after night these precautions were followed out most strictly. During the day, too, my pistols were always in my belt. Bulger felt the danger I was in, and he, by his vigilance, gave me the advantage of eyes in the back of my head. A low growl warned me of the approach of the master or one of the crew. Thus protected and guarded, I felt that nothing save a general mutiny need be feared, and this I knew to be almost impossible, for a number of the crew were too devoted to me to listen to any traitorous proposals. They would have slain the master in cold blood had he dared to breathe the word mutiny. Things went very well for about 10 days, when I saw that a terrible struggle was going on in the captain's mind. I began to fear that he might lose his reason and throw himself into the sea. His face took on a yellow-greenish hue. He was literally dying of fright. One morning he threw himself upon his knees in front of me, and with tear-stained cheeks implored me to put back to the African coast again. I did all I could to quiet him, but in vain. His reason was slowly but surely giving way. Calling the mate to me, I put him in command of the vessel and directed him to confine the captain in his cabin and place a guard over him. It cut me to the heart to be obliged to do this, for the poor fellow begged like a dog to be left in command of his ship. But I was deaf to his entreaties. I felt that now all trouble was at an end. The wind was blowing 15 knots an hour. Every stitch of sail had been crowded on. We fairly leapt out of the water like a thing of life, half flying, half swimming. Ever and anon I glanced at the compass. She was headed dead south. My cheeks tingled and I could feel the flow of warm blood through every vein in my body. The moon went up like a shield of burnished gold. The sea glittered like liquid fire. Anon, a porpoise leaped into the air and sent 1,000 ripples circling away as she plunged into the water again. Our good ship cleft the glassy bosom of the sea like some huge black monster of the deep and left a trail of fire in her wake as far as the eye could reach. Towards midnight, I went to rest, but neither rest nor sleep was possible. Half undressing, I threw myself into my hammock, and Bulger took his accustomed place at the door. The lantern was not strong enough to overcome the light of the full moon. It streamed through the bull's eye in weird, fantastic rays and crowded my cabin with strange and mysterious forms. They were 7. Their faces and figures were godlike. So white, so beautiful were they. There was an indescribable sadness in their full dark eyes. They spake not a word. Suddenly, the paneling of the ceiling parted and disclosed a staircase wrapped in dim, uncertain light. Adown these steps came a most gracious being, so white and fair and lovely that I gazed with bated breath. Down, down it came, nearer and nearer. She needed but wings to be an angel. But oh, her fair face was so filled with sorrow. Her lips were parted. Her long black hair fell in confused tresses on her shoulders. She stepped into the cabin, and then, with a quick, dread look, her gaze fell upon the 7 bowed figures. "Paula!" they cried, and drew their white robes over their heads. "Land ho! Land ho!" What? Could I believe my ears? "Land ho! Land ho!" With a bound I sprang from my hammock and rushed upon deck. Aye, it was true. There, half a mile ahead of us, was a sight that stunned me like the blow of a bludgeon. Land it was, but not such a land as in my wildest dreams I had hoped to find. 10,000 lights glimmered on that mysterious shore and illuminated the front of a Roman temple whiter than milk. A marble staircase of the same hue led down to the very water's edge. A sacrifice was in progress. From the highest terrace, a column of black smoke curled slowly upward. No sound reached my ear. I stood almost bereft of my senses. At last, my power of speech returned. I ordered anchor to be cast, and clinging to the shrouds of my good ship, gazed long and joyfully upon the entrancing scene. The land rose in natural terraces from the seashore, and no matter in what direction you looked, your eye caught glimpses of a graceful statue or group of statuary gleamed in the white moonlight amid the dark foliage, like white-robed figures astray in a wood. "It must be," I murmured to myself. "I have found it. This Roman temple, this marble stairway, these groups of statuary, all point to the glorious success of my voyage of discovery. This is the sculptor's isle." How long I stood there gazing upon the beautiful shore I know not. Someone pulling gently at my sleeve roused me from my reverie. It was Bulger. I stooped and stroked his head for a few moments. Suddenly I woke to a sense of great weariness, and casting another glance toward that mysterious shore, I turned and descended to the cabin. I soon fell into a deep sleep. The terrible strain upon my nerves since leaving the Cape, caused by the half-mutiny of the crew, the insanity of the ship's master, and the long watches through which I had lain and listened for the cry of land, had at last told upon me. The sun was several hours high when I sprang out of my hammock and rushed upon deck. Could it all have been a dream? Should I find the noble temple staircase of marble and all the towering statues melted away into thin air? Ah, no! That beautiful shore was still there, unrolled before my wondering eyes like some fair picture full of light and grace and delicious coloring. "Man the launch!" I called out, and in quicker time than it takes to tell it, I was on my way to the shore of the Sculptor's Isle. Faithful Bulger sat beside me, his eyes bright and expressive as he gazed into my face. Landing at the foot of the marble stairway, I sprang lightly out of the launch, followed by Bulger, and bounded up the marble stairs. There were 3 landings before I reached the level of the temple, from each of which the outlook grew more and more delightful. In truth, it was a glorious approach to produce which art and nature had fairly outdone themselves. At length I cleared the last flight of steps, and with a throbbing heart crossed the tessellated court and paused in front of the entrance to the temple. The embers were still smoldering on the altar, around which stood several white-robed priests with low bowed heads and averted faces. Unwilling to break in upon their solemn office, I turned and followed a broad way paved with marble and shaded by most graceful trees and trailing vines. At every step my eyes fell upon some statue of ravishing beauty, now nymphs, now goddess, now Jove himself, now the great Caesar, now the fair Graces, now terrible Pluto, now smiling Circe, now the crescent-crowned Diana, accoutred for the chase, now dancing satyrs, now goat-footed Pan, now some Roman hero or statesman, and ever and anon came the figure of a maiden, wondrously fair, but with an unutterable look of sadness upon her beautiful face. So often did the same figure meet my gaze that I was led at last to approach its pedestal in hopes of finding some explanation. I gave a cry of pleasure as my eyes fell upon the name sculptured there. It was Paula. Now every doubt was dissipated. I had indeed found the sculptor's isle. Broad winding paths leading right and left now lured my footsteps. No fairyland could be more beautiful. Golden fruit glistened mid the dark green leaves. Flowers of countless hues bloomed on every side, sending forth the most delicate perfumes. Trailing vines hung in graceful festoons or twined around the pedestals of the statues, carrying their white blossoms to the whiter hands of these silent and motionless inhabitants of this region of loneliness. I say inhabitants, for as yet my eye had seen no living creature save the priests grouped about the altar. Have I landed upon the shores of an island upon which nature, with a lavish hand, has bestowed stately forests, placid lakes, purling brooks, trees laden with delicious fruits, plants waving their flowery tassels and plumes in the perfumed air, vines trailing their rich variegated foliage from tree to tree, a radiant sky above, a soil clad with velvety verdure beneath, only to find it abandoned, deserted of man? A thing of beauty yet loneliness, a mere polished and painted shell, out of which all life has gone forever? Such was the train of thought which busied my mind as I strolled along through these winding paths paved with marble shut in by a leafy roof, through which ever and anon the sunlight burst to light up the masterpieces of the sculptor's art, around whose pedestals climbed and clambered scores of flowering vines, some carrying in their curved laps clusters of berries brighter in hue than burnished gold, others holding out to the passer-by bunches of grapes deeper in purple than the Lydian dye. As I pursued my way through this enchanted garden, in which the swaying lily stalks bent their perfumed-filled cups down to my cheeks, and the trees dropped their gold and purple fruit at my feet, while deep in the hosky thicket of red-leaved shrubs and silken-tufted pine, the melancholy nightingale warbled its liquid melody in slow and plaintive measure. My heart yearned for the sound of a human voice. Would that some living being, I cried, no matter how bent and twisted in figure or how discordant in voice, might come forth to meet me in this beautiful solitude. I noticed now that my path was ascending a gently sloping hillock. I quickened my pace, for I was anxious to stand upon some elevation so that I could command a more extensive view of the outlying country. As I gained the summit of the hillock, a scene of indescribable beauty met my gaze. As far as the eye could reach, I saw unrolled beneath me a landscape of such surpassing loveliness that I paused spellbound. Imagine a valley shut in by wooded heights through which a silvery stream courses tranquilly. Here a forest giant spreads its far-reaching limbs, and there a clump of fruit trees display their load of golden treasures in the sunlight. On this side, flowering shrubs shine white as ivory against the dark greensward. On that, with trailing vines and trimmed copses, man's hand has built many a shady bower of fantastic outline. To this, add scores of statues posed in every conceivable attitude of grace and beauty. Here a group, there a single figure, and farther on by twos and threes, standing, reclining, sitting at play, in meditation, listening, reading, thrumming stringed instruments, in attitudes of the chase, casting the quoit, or reaching up to pluck fruit or flowers. Is this a dream? I murmured. Am I not the sport of some mischievous spirit of the place? And we'll pause here and we'll go on with this chapter in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.